remind everyone of the House of Mouse rules. No villainous schemes.
In these villains retrospectives, I like to begin the videos by giving a little background about the movie that our villains are featured in. In the case of 1946's Song of the South, there might be some more background than usually necessary, given the controversial nature of the movie. The movie was based on the many Uncle Remus stories collected by Joel Chandler Harris. The son of Irish immigrants, Harris was inspired to adapt these stories while living on a plantation in Georgia during the Civil War. Harris was sent there to work on a newspaper run by the plantation owner, but found himself growing close with the enslaved people on the plantation during his off time, listening to their fables and folklore. After the war, Harris began printing the stories that had been told to him. Uncle Remus was the narrator within the stories, an amalgamation of the real storytellers that Harris had met. The characters in the stories are animals, and many have Brer as something of a surname, meaning brother. The stories were written with a thick dialect that was meant to be authentic, but today is viewed as controversial and unfavorable by many, given that Harris was a white man taking on the vocal mannerisms of black narrators. Most Uncle Remus stories feature Brer Rabbit as the protagonist. He is a classic trickster archetype seen throughout history. Since he is unable to defend himself physically, he has to rely on his wits to survive against the many predators he faces. His most common foe in the stories is Brer Fox, followed by Brer Wolf. Other antagonists include Brer Bear, Brer Turkey Buzzard, and a human called Mr. Man. A good deal of the Brer Rabbit stories generally follow a similar pattern. One of the antagonists either captures Brer Rabbit or poses a threat to him. Brer Rabbit thinks quickly and tricks the predator into letting him go. These tricks will often result in the predator injuring or humiliating himself for good measure. Walt Disney had been familiar with these stories since his childhood, and thought they would make a good basis for a movie. He initially planned to make an entire animated feature based on the various Uncle Remus stories. However, due to budget concerns, and a desire to expand his company's output beyond cartoons, the Brer Rabbit adventures were scaled down to 3 animated segments in a largely live-action movie. Song of the South takes place shortly after the Civil War. It follows a young boy named Johnny as his family moves to an old plantation where his father grew up. Nearby lives Uncle Remus, who repeats his role from the Chandler version. Johnny grows close to Uncle Remus, who helps the boy cope with the problems he faces by telling him stories of Brer Rabbit, and how he is able to escape from Brer Fox and Brer Bear. Because of the controversies surrounding the movie over the years, Disney has chosen to never release it in any video form in the United States. It had some video and Laserdisc releases overseas, but they've all gone out of print, and haven't had any re-releases since the early 90s. It has never been available anywhere on DVD or Blu-ray, and it will most likely never be seen on Disney+. This video is not meant to be an argument for or against Song of the South. I just wanted to put a few things in context before we discuss Brer Fox and Brer Bear. Most, though not all, of the movie's problems arise from the live-action sections, which make up about 2/3 of the film. The movie takes place during the Reconstruction, after the enslaved people had been freed, but it does not do a good job of making their freedom clear. Even after being freed, the formerly enslaved people had to deal with plenty more hardships and oppression, but the sharecroppers seen in the movie come across as happy and carefree. The whole film gives a very rose-colored look at a sad, bitter time, much like Gone with the Wind. There is no evidence that the film was made with malice or hate, but there was a lot of ignorance on display. I can certainly see why so many people have taken issue with the movie over the years. If you want to know more about this subject in particular, there are plenty of easily found articles out there that explain the movie's flawed delivery better than I can. Moving on to the villains, Brer Fox is certainly the brains of the outfit. Brer Bear can't really be considered a sidekick, since he has moments that show he is more in control of the situation than the fox and the rabbit realize. But it is usually Brer Fox who comes up with the ideas to trap Brer Rabbit, and who leads the hunt. Like in the original stories, Brer Fox is quick-thinking and cunning. Unlike a real fox who hunts rabbits for a meal, the cartoon fox has a personal vendetta against his prey. While he's certainly happy at the prospect of a roasted rabbit, Brer Fox hates Brer Rabbit because the rabbit has outwitted him so many times. Brer Rabbit is smarter, and Brer Fox can't stand that. In one segment, he can easily cook Brer Rabbit, but opts for what he believes to be a more painful, agonizing death. The idea of seeing Brer Rabbit suffer is more satisfying than any meal could ever be. Brer Bear, meanwhile, is much slower in every way. Brer Fox speaks incredibly rapidly, to the point that the animators behind the scenes had trouble syncing his lips to the dialogue. Brer Bear drawls out his words, and is often unable to finish his sentences before someone else cuts him off. While Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox are constantly working to trick each other, Brer Bear is often an observer until he's forced to directly get involved. It's clear to the audience just from his first few seconds of screen time that there's not much going on up there. The only quick thing about him is his temper. He is very easily angered, and will aggressively retaliate with his trademark club. It doesn't matter how close you are to Brer Bear, you never want to tick him off, which is easier said than done. Brer Fox was voiced by James Baskett, who had initially auditioned for a bit part of a butterfly character. Walt Disney was so impressed with his audition that he gave him the role of Uncle Remus and Brer Fox. His performance as Remus earned him an honorary Academy Award, making him the first black man to ever receive an Oscar. His rapid-fire delivery as Brer Fox is truly something to behold.
I got him! I got that little rabbit! I sure as got him! I got the little rabbit to stop with, sure!
In addition to Uncle Remus and Brer Fox, Baskett also performed Brer Rabbit's dialogue in the third animated segment, when Brer Rabbit's actor, Johnny Lee, was touring with the USO. As for the butterfly Baskett initially auditioned for, I'm not sure if that particular version of the character ever made it into the movie. A few butterflies do appear, but they act like giggly schoolgirls and are all voiced by women. Brer Bear was voiced by Nick Stewart, who gave the character a nice amount of depth, more than you might expect from such a dim-witted foil. Instead of making the bear purely a stupid brute, Stewart voiced him like a large child, easily angered, but easily excited as well. Even when he's threatening to clobber Brer Rabbit, it's hard not to find Brer Bear surprisingly lovable.
Zip-a-dee-doo, da, zip-a-dee, hey, zip-da-da-da.
Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox's relationship is a somewhat balanced one. Brer Rabbit is arrogant enough to let his guard down and get caught by Brer Fox, but is smart enough to figure out a way to escape. Brer Fox is smart enough to capture Brer Rabbit, but is dumb enough to be outfoxed in the end. Brer Bear proves to be a wild card, since he is often the one to be fooled, but not always. In the first animated segment, Brer Rabbit is leaving home, the Briar Patch, to find a place free of troubles. He almost immediately gets snared in one of Brer Fox's traps. When Brer Bear lumbers along, Brer Rabbit says that he has been hired as a scarecrow and is being paid $1 a minute. He offers Brer Bear the job, and the bear eagerly switches places with the rabbit, just as Brer Fox arrives to claim his prize. In the second segment, based on the most well-known Uncle Remus story, Brer Fox constructs a tar baby, another element from the original text that caused controversy when included in the movie. He correctly assumes that Brer Rabbit will mistake the object for a real person, and take offense when it ignores his greetings. Brer Rabbit gets in a fight with the dummy, and ends up trapped in tar. Brer Fox keeps thinking up ways to kill Brer Rabbit, while Brer Bear insists that they just knock his head clean off. Brer Rabbit uses reverse psychology, and tells Brer Fox that the worst thing he can think of is getting thrown in the thorny briar patch. When Brer Fox does this, Brer Rabbit is able to escape, having been born and bred in said briar patch. The third segment begins with Brer Rabbit having already been captured by the villains. Some storybooks and comics released around this time explain that the fox and bear loudly state that they are giving up on chasing Brer Rabbit, who is simply too smart for them. Brer Rabbit overhears this and takes a nap in the forest, not having to worry about being caught anymore. Of course, this was the baddies' plan the whole time, and Brer Rabbit awakens to find himself in their lair, about to be roasted on an open fire. Brer Rabbit begins to laugh in the face of certain death, and explains that it's because he has just been to his laughing place, which causes nothing but joy. Brer Fox isn't fooled, but Brer Bear insists that Brer Rabbit show them the laughing place. Brer Rabbit leads them to an angry bee's nest, and the two villains are chased off by the swarm. Brer Rabbit, true to his word, cannot stop laughing at this. It should be noted that while all three of these stories are based on actual Uncle Remus tales, Brer Bear does not appear nearly as much in the original text. Out of the three featured in the movie, Brer Bear was only in the original $1 a minute story. The original Tar Baby and Laughing Place stories only feature Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox. Brer Wolf was the second most common antagonist in the stories, and Brer Bear appeared less frequently. Because of the legacy, good or bad, of Song of the South, Brer Bear is regarded as a more important character in the Uncle Remus stories than he actually was. And non-Disney adaptations will sometimes also have him working alongside Brer Fox, something he rarely did in the actual stories, if ever. Examples of this include Ralph Bakshi's Coonskin movie, the Emerald Cities Productions Brer Rabbit cartoons, and the former Tales of the Okefenokee Dark Ride at Six Flags Over Georgia. I don't think there has ever been an official reason why Disney chose Brer Bear to be one of the major players rather than Brer Wolf, but I can imagine it would be because they already had the very recognizable Big Bad Wolf in their cartoons. Also, the same year Song of the South hit theaters, Disney released Make Mine Music, which had its own wolf character in the Peter and the Wolf segment. At this point, Disney didn't have any well-known bear characters, and it would be 20 years before Winnie the Pooh and Baloo joined the franchise, so Brer Bear was probably a tempting idea. Despite having the worst intentions for their victim, there's something incredibly likable about Brer Fox and Brer Bear. They're every bit as engaging as Brer Rabbit, and a lot of their charm comes to how they function as a trio. Most of the comedy from the animated segments is based around how the three play off of each other. They're all wonderfully animated, and it's a treat to watch their personalities clash. There's always a big element of fun with these characters, and thus Brer Fox's threats to roast or skin Brer Rabbit end up coming across as Looney Tunes slapstick, rather than gruesome torture. Unlike past Disney villains like the Wicked Queen or Stromboli, whom we love to hate, it seems that most fans of Brer Fox and Brer Bear love them in a more genuine way. It is probably for this reason that for a good while, all three Brer characters would be seen hanging out with the heroic Disney characters in various promotional pictures. Occasionally you would see another villain like Captain Hook slipped in, but Brer Fox and Brer Bear seem to get the most frequent pass to appear alongside Mickey and Minnie. For a while, at least one of them could be seen on the showboat at the end of FANTASMIC at the theme parks, a spot otherwise occupied by heroes. Brer Bear in particular seemed to be a favorite among the Disney staff, appearing more than Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit. In addition to various print ads, he can be seen making cameos in Who Framed Roger Rabbit and The Lion King 1.5 in crowd scenes, consisting mostly of good guys with no other villains in sight. Despite these two being so likable, their live-action counterparts are anything but. When Uncle Remus tells Johnny the stories in Song of the South, Johnny is meant to relate to Brer Rabbit. In his day-to-day life, Johnny deals with a pair of bullies, Jake and Joe, played by Georgie Noakes and Gene Holland. These two are meant to be reminiscent of the Fox and Bear, with the larger of the two even threatening to knock Johnny's head clean off to drive home the comparison. Their hobbies include pushing their little sister around and attempting to drown a puppy for fun. Charming stuff. Since I can't find any other good place to mention this little tidbit, I want to say now that the three Brer characters were featured on a record celebrating Mickey Mouse's birthday in 1954. Nick Stewart and Johnny Lee returned to voice Brer Bear and Brer Rabbit. However, James Baskett had passed away, so Brer Fox was voiced by Stan Fredberg.
When he gets up, I'm just gonna knock his head clean.
Oh, no you ain't. No you ain't, Brer Bear. When he gets stuck in the glue, I'm gonna grab him and eat him.
When Song of the South was in production, there was some talk of making a series of animated shorts featuring the Brer characters following the film's release. The movie received backlash even when it first opened, which deterred them from this idea, but the characters would live on in the comics. A Sunday comic strip called Uncle Remus and His Tales of Brer Rabbit had been created to promote the movie in 1945, but ended up running in papers until 1972. The characters would also be featured in numerous comic books published by Disney. Over the years, they have appeared in hundreds, practically thousands of Disney stores worldwide, and seem to be most popular in the Netherlands. These comics would greatly expand the characters' world, introducing more friends and foes. Brer Wolf finally got to appear, although his design varied depending on who was drawing him. Some comics and storybooks gave him a ferocious look to contrast Brer Fox's more comedic appearance. Other books gave him a sillier look, making him almost indistinguishable from Brer Fox. In general, he never appeared enough to get a consistent personality. Another new character was Brer Weasel. He was introduced as a rich city slicker type with an outfit resembling a Texas oil tycoon. In his initial appearance, he planned to swindle all the critters. When Brer Rabbit found out about his scheme, the Weasel attempted to hang him, before being arrested by the town's sheriff. In most of his later appearances, Brer Weasel still acted as a sly huckster, but rarely with the violence seen in his debut. His oil tycoon design is the most consistently seen one, especially in current Netherland comics, but he had a few other variations. Some comics show him as a generic weasel, and others have him looking like the one seen in The Wind in the Willows. As a nod to that, at least one of those times had him speaking with a thick Cockney accent. The final notable antagonist was Brer Turkey Buzzard, who was more of a lazy opportunist than an outright villain. Although he worked with Brer Weasel on a scheme at least once, he was generally just a nuisance. In one comic, he even helped Brer Rabbit outwit Brer Fox and Brer Bear. At the time the Song of the South comics were first being printed, comics starring the Three Little Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf had recently become a feature in Walt Disney's Comics and Stories. It wasn't long before the continuities were combined. Big Bad would occasionally target Brer Rabbit, but he was mostly interested in capturing the Three Little Pigs. Unlike Brer Fox's grudge stemming from jealousy over Brer Rabbit's superior wits, Big Bad was mostly after the pigs for food. Big Bad crossed paths with Brer Bear the most, often finding himself setting off the bear's temper right when he would have otherwise captured the pigs. In these comics, Brer Bear's good side was often on display. Although he was still grumpy and dim-witted, we got to see his wife and children, who he clearly loved. The design of his kids, the number he had, and their genders varied from story to story, but the most commonly seen iteration was two little boys who looked a great deal like their father. A series of French comics based around the Big Bad Wolf's son, Little Bad Wolf, had only one bear child named Junior. This particular series also had Brer Fox's son, Alfred, who never appeared in any other media. It should be noted that the original Uncle Remus stories showed all three Brers in question as having wives and children, but Brer Bear is the only one to be consistently seen with them in the Disney comics. Brer Bear was often depicted in these comics as being a generally honest hard worker. Although he still chased Brer Rabbit around, he made an honest living as a farmer, and was on friendly terms with most of the other animals as long as they didn't get on his bad side. There have been a few comics I've found over the years that show Brer Bear as much more evil, even threatening the Seven Dwarfs at gunpoint once, but these stories are outliers. In most stories, he goes along with Brer Fox's plots mostly because he just doesn't know any better. It doesn't excuse his actions, but the stories that portray him as being flat-out evil really don't give him enough credit as a character. Brer Fox was given significantly fewer sympathetic moments, but he had a couple. He teamed up with Brer Rabbit once to get revenge on Brer Bear, who was hoarding honey during a famine. In another story, the critters mistakenly think Brer Rabbit is dead. Brer Fox tearfully says he misses Brer Rabbit most of all, and I think he's being genuine. One story had Brer Fox pretend to be too old and tired to continue chasing Brer Rabbit. Unlike the Laughing Place story, Brer Rabbit does not take this lightly, and says that foxes chasing rabbits is a family tradition of theirs. He genuinely cannot imagine life without Brer Fox. For all their feuding and trickery, Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox seem to like each other, in a rather twisted way. Brer Fox has appeared as a villain from time to time outside his main continuity. A few stories have shown him acting as a thief toward characters like Mickey Mouse and the Disney Ducks. None of the Brer comics are epic adventures like you might see in a Scrooge McDuck comic, but they're a lot of fun, and a nice way for the characters to continue their never-ending chase. The places where the characters are probably most well known are the Disney theme parks. Brer Fox and Brer Bear have been meetable characters since the 60s. They were frequently seen in promotional photos for New Orleans Square when the area opened in 1966. Although they aren't as common for meet and greets today, they can still be seen in parades and shows across the parks. Animatronic versions of the characters, alongside Brer Rabbit, appeared at the end of the Mickey Mouse Revue in 1971. This was one of Walt Disney World's opening day attractions, and featured Mickey leading a Disney concert, with plenty of classic characters singing well-known songs. The Brers naturally led everyone in Zippity-Doo-Dah, the song that earned their movie an Academy Award. Once again, Brer Fox and Brer Bear were some of the only villains present in a cast of good guys. The only other villains were Kaa from The Jungle Book, who somehow played his own tail like a flute in the orchestra, and an animated shadow of the Big Bad Wolf. Of course, their biggest claim to fame in the parks is the Splash Mountain attraction. This flume ride is designed to look like Brer Fox's lair from the movie, Chickapin Hill, with a huge waterfall coming out of the top leading to the Briar Patch below. The attraction can be seen at Disneyland, Walt Disney World, and Tokyo Disneyland as of this video's posting. As you may know, it's been announced that there are plans to revamp the two United States versions of the ride into a Princess and the Frog attraction, but due to the pandemic, it's unclear when exactly that will happen. The scenes in the ride vary from park to park in terms of visual details and the order in which they appear, but the general presentation is the same in all three versions. The plot is a clever amalgamation of all three animated segments in the movie. Brer Rabbit is leaving his briar patch, being followed by Brer Fox and Brer Bear, as always. After tricking Brer Bear into getting snared in one of Brer Fox's traps, Brer Rabbit calls out to his foes that he is heading for his laughing place. The curious villains follow Brer Rabbit to a huge hollow tree, which caves in, causing all 3 of the critters to fall into an underground cavern, swarming with angry bees. Brer Rabbit is distracted laughing at Brer Bear getting stung, and finds himself caught by Brer Fox. The climax of the ride has guests pass through Brer Fox's cave, where an animated shadow of Brer Fox is cast on the wall, his huge toothy snout appearing to engulf Brer Rabbit. It's a striking effect, and it's one of the only times Brer Fox has ever looked truly menacing. Brer Rabbit pleads for them not to fling him in the briar patch, which is of course what they do, signified by the iconic final drop. In this version, Brer Fox and Brer Bear end up falling into the briar patch as well. The ride ends with the baddies attempting to untangle themselves from the thorns, while a hungry alligator tugs on Brer Fox's tail. The Disneyland version of the ride, which opened in 1989, had Brer Fox now voiced by J.D. Hall. Hall can be heard in 2 other attractions at the park, narrating the Hall of Presidents and voicing Frederick Douglass in Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. Nick Stewart returned to voice Brer Bear one final time. The Disney World version opened in 1992, after Stewart had passed away. Since some of the scenes with Brer Bear were different from the Disneyland version, new dialogue was recorded for the character by James Avery, best known as Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. In this version of the ride, Avery also voices Brer Frog, who serves as the narrator in place of Uncle Remus. Given Splash Mountain's popularity and Song of the South's lack of availability, it's not surprising that most people know Brer Fox and Brer Bear from the theme parks, rather than their movie. Although there has never been a Song of the South video game for obvious reasons, the 2 have shown up in Disneyland-inspired games. Mickey no Tokyo Disneyland DAIBOUKEN, aka Mickey's Great Adventure in Tokyo Disneyland, was released for the Super Nintendo in Japan only. In the game, Mickey has to rescue his friends from Pete, who has imprisoned them in various attractions. The Splash Mountain level features several identical Brer Fox enemies. The hitchhiking alligator is an enemy as well, and a hopping frog serves as a mini-boss, despite the frogs and gators all being friendly in the ride. I'm genuinely surprised they didn't try to make the Boot Hill Boys enemies for the game. This pair of sneering vultures taunts guests as they reach the final drop in the attraction, and although they're not evil, they're sinister enough to fit a role for an obstacle in this kind of game. Pete is the boss at the end of each level, dressed to match the theme. In this one, he's dressed in Brer Fox's clothes, and tries to shake pieces of the briar patch loose to fall onto Mickey. Brer Fox and Brer Bear play a much more significant role in the Xbox game KINECT Magic Kingdom Adventures. This game features a fully explorable Disneyland, full of characters to meet, and minigames themed to various attractions. The Splash Mountain level shows Brer Rabbit leaving a beehive on Brer Fox's doorstep. Brer Rabbit and the player then must avoid the angry Fox and Bear, who retaliate by throwing beehives back at them. Outside the minigame, players can interact with Brer Fox and Brer Bear as a meet and greet. They can get an autograph and a big hug from the critters, and the interactions are adorable. Brer Bear is very generous with his hugs. Brer Fox acts a bit more standoffish, but he's definitely got a soft spot for the kids visiting the parks.
No, don't get all mushy on me now.
For this game, J.D. Hall and James Avery reprise their roles. I'm fairly certain that this is their only CGI appearance to date, unless you're counting their barely visible cameos in another video game, Walt Disney World Quest Magical Racing Tour. Brer Fox and Brer Bear have managed to stay afloat over the years, despite a lot of odds. They came from a movie that had major problems from the start. It has some memorable music and truly remarkable animation, but it will probably always be remembered in a negative light. And yet, despite Brer Fox and Brer Bear's dubious origins in the Disney canon, despite their movie being hard to locate today, despite their theme park presence greatly diminishing, I hope this bumbling trio will live on in some way. I do not condone the ignorance on display in Song of the South as a whole, but the 3 Brer characters have a distinct charm to them, thanks to their gorgeous animation and incredibly talented voice actors. The future is unclear for them, but one thing is for sure. They'll never catch Brer Rabbit for long, but they'll always keep trying. In the next entry, we'll be looking at Lumpjaw the Bear and Willie the Giant from Fun and Fancy Free.
I hope you wanted it to say Bruh Bear, 'cause that's what it says.